to talk about, we could just pull it into our conversation. But while while I'm sharing information, and I'd like you to stay with two questions in your head, right? Like as I'm talking and I'm sharing stuff, or as you see information on the screen. One is, what does it mean, right? Whatever I'm sharing with you, what does it mean? And the second question that I'd like you to stay with is, how do we know this, right? I mean, like in school, or whether we're in school or we're not in school, we sort of get information, we get all kinds of information. And often, when we're reading something or when we are watching something, we sometimes passively take on that information. So then the question is, what does it mean? I mean, sometimes we don't think about what it means. More importantly, I think very often we don't think about how do we know this. Often we just take it for granted if it's in a textbook, particularly, right? Or if it's in something you're reading on the internet, you're like, or if your teacher is telling you something, right? Or an adult is telling you something, you're like, oh, okay. So maybe what might be good is to keep these two questions in mind. What does it mean? What is Radha saying? She's throwing some stuff at us. What does it mean? And the second thing is, how do I know this? Or how does anybody know this, right? Yeah. So I thought maybe you'll stay with those two questions, and then
And
yeah, and you can quiz after that and say, okay, so you've told us this, like, how did scientists know this? Or how did you know this? Like, where did you get this information from? Right? Makes sense to everybody?
absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I think what we'll do is I'll take a minute to introduce Radha to all of you, and then I'll hand over back to Radha, and she can lead us into this exciting masterclass. We have a lot of people joining us. Welcome. So just a few some agreements for us before we get started. So I'm Janani. I'm one of the community managers at Gifted World, and I'm very excited to meet some of you for the first time. Some of you have been joining our master classes regularly, and it's so fun to see this community being built. So if you have any questions through this masterclass, feel free to leave it in the chat, and you can leave the questions as they come, and Radha will either answer them in between if it's relevant or towards the end of her presentation. We'll have a good amount of time to interact and ask questions at that point. So Radha is actually, I'm very excited to be here. I've been following Radha's work for a few years now, and this is the first time I get to work with her. So I'm excited about that. Radha has so many hats and so many sort of projects that she's working with that I've been hearing her name in many different places. Right? Radha she is an environmental scientist by training, and she worked as a global environmental consultant for 18 years, and then donned the hat of an educator. Right? She worked at Rishi Valley. It's a school here in India where she taught environmental sustainability. Then she was a visiting faculty at Azim Premji University, and she's engaging with so many different wonderful projects around sustainability and nature and education as a mentor, as a advisor, and as a team member. And I will, without too much more ado, hand it back to Radha to get us kicked off.
Thank you, Janani. That was very generous. And welcome, everyone. What I'd like to sort of say here is, I've got a few things that I'd like to share, about the topic that we've sort of taken on for today's session is, where are the women of science, right? So we'll use this question, but then we're also going to talk about some larger issues about how we practice science and what we know as science. So I'm going to use a few slides to share some thoughts, okay? And as we go through this, if you have questions, like Janvi said, just drop it into the chat box. And also, the one thing that I believe is that there is no right or wrong question. So anything that seems like you want to know more about, or you have a question, if you drop it in, it's very likely that there are many of these things I don't know either. So maybe we can take it away as something for all of us to work on and, learn together, right? So does that make sense? And will you please be very, very comfortable, because the questions you ask will hugely help me to learn more. So in that spirit, we shall go forward, all right? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can all of you see it? And yeah, yes, no, you can do a thumbs up. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to start with the question of where are the women of science? Now, I just want to ask everyone here, whoever would like to respond, why am I asking this, or why are we actually sitting and asking this question today in 2024, right? And I've got this slide here, which has got a whole bunch of, book covers, actually. And these are from about 15 years ago. Many of these books, particularly the panel at the center, is from only 5 or 6 years ago. So the question is, why in 2024 do we have to ask this question, right? Where are the women of science? Because one would imagine that whether it, irrespective of one's gender, science is something we all do, right? And we're talking about modern science here. So think about this, and if you have any comments, etc., just drop it in the chat box. So why is it that we're even asking this question today, right? So we're going to move forward, and I'm going to actually start with a small, what shall I say? Maybe like a little quiz, okay? Okay, so you can actually either unmute and respond, or you can raise your hand, respond, all right? Or just think about it, because it's not like I'm going to give any answers at this point. We will discover the answers as we go through our conversation. So the first one is, the female brain is 5 ounces lighter than the male brain, and this is responsible for men being naturally better mathematicians, okay? So what do you think? Yes, no, not sure? Yeah, think about it. Then, and if you're saying yes or no, or not sure, my question would be, how do you know? Like, on what basis are you making that response? Okay. Then there are a few top women scientists at elite universities because men have intrinsically greater aptitude for science than women. And that's a biological difference. So men have greater aptitude, and therefore you have very few top women scientists at elite universities. Yes, no, not sure. Women were initially barred from the US space program due to concerns around premenstrual syndrome on board the craft. Right? So before somebody before women go through their menstruation, some women have what is called a premenstrual syndrome, where they have either psychological, physical, physiological symptoms which can be bothersome. Yeah? And then there's this, our brains are plastic and moldable throughout our lives, reflecting what we do and don't do. So it's not a fixed thing that it stops growing after a point. Okay. So yes, no, not sure. And excelling in physics and mathematics requires an innate aptitude that just can't be taught. Okay. So that means either you have it or you don't. Okay. So yes, no, not sure. Yeah. I can see that some people are very busy.
Yeah, trying to type.
Nice.
So I was wondering if we can give them a minute. If you could say
Yeah.
question 1, what do we feel? And then we
Yeah,
can,
exactly.
yeah.
We can just take it from there. Yeah. Okay, so question 1. Yeah, it's all on your screen. So question 1, what do you think? Take a couple of minutes to, just drop into the, like Preeti said, no. And then there's question 2. What do you think? Is it true?
Mom, I don't think it's true.
Who's that?
Me.
Okay.
That is
Yeah.
my name.
Okay.
Mom, because women have less opportunities in the society when compared to men.
Okay. I'm
And I
like,
think that
yeah. Okay. And Aisha says no, because then the heaviest animals would be the best mathematicians. That's a good one, Aisha. I haven't heard that one before. Okay. And so go through now the third question, and then the fourth, and then the fifth. So we'll wait for a little bit.
Ma'am,
So just to explain it to some of our younger chaps, can
Yeah.
you tell us what is premenstrual syndrome?
Yes. Okay. So what happens is when when women have their menstruation, their periods, right? Sometimes a few days before, you get some signs, I would say. I wouldn't even call them symptoms. You get some signs, like some women, they have they feel bloated, okay, and then there are others who feel irritable. So it's psychological, some of these symptoms. That is, you feel irritable, you feel uncomfortable, and then there are others who actually have serious pain, pain particularly around the uterus, and some have it in their abdomen. There are these kinds of signs that some women go through. And the question then is that, is it true that the US spacecraft program actually barred women because they have these syndromes on board the craft? And so, of course, people didn't know what to do with it, I guess. So, would actually somebody make a decision like that? Yeah. So somebody says no, okay, well, you'll be surprised at the decisions that are made in this world. Yeah. I mean, one would imagine no, right? Like you would say, why? Why would you do something like that, right? But then we'll talk a little bit more about some of these things. And then, of course, there is Ainish says that the first is true, but I think for a different reason. Okay, Ainish, that's a very interesting point, because I'm actually going to go a little bit more into that. We'll share some information that's available on that. And then our brains are plastic and moldable throughout our lives, reflecting what we do and don't do. So we can. I mean, it's not like we're all set. All right. Prezi says yes. Mariam says yes. All right. Very encouraging. So it gives you agency, right? I mean, through life, you can, it's not like the growth of your brain is sort of set. But we'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm not saying yes or no, but it's very interesting to hear everybody's responses. And finally, excelling in physics and mathematics requires an innate aptitude that just can't be taught. So either you have the ability to do physics and math or you don't. And coming after the fourth question, it's very interesting. Yes.
Now, what's the meaning of innate attitude?
Innate means it's built in you. That is, so I would like to say you inherited it. You're born with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
ma'am, I'm not sure of anything, ma'am.
Sorry, you're not sure of anything. Excellent. You'll make a very good scientist. Let me say that. That's fine. Okay. So this was an interesting exercise. I'm going to go forward because we're going to come back to many of these things. As we go through the conversation, you'll see that we'll come across many of these things again. And then maybe towards the end, people can sort of come back and tell us what you think. All right? Yeah. All right. So what is your perception of science? So I want somebody is everybody studying science? Whether you're in the 5th grade or 6th grade?
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
everybody's studying science. Super.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what I want at least somebody from, say, the 5th, 6th grade and somebody from the 9th, 10th grade to respond to this question. What is your perception of science?
Ma'am, what's the meaning of
Okay, perception. What do you think science is?
ma'am, can I tell?
Yes, you can tell.
Ma'am, I think science is the study of how things function around you.
Okay. Okay.
And, scientists are basically people who observe things and
Okay.
then form rules out of them.
Okay.
Because it's just like you watching a chess game and you're not knowing how to do it.
Okay.
And here the name playing the chess game and you're the observer.
Okay.
And when you can watch other people play, you can understand and you can make your own rules out of it. So I think that's science.
Okay. Have you listened to Richard Feynman talking about science and chess?
Yes,
Yes, I figured. Okay, so which grade were you in? Which grade are you
I'm
in?
currently 9th grade.
9th grade. Okay, can I get somebody from the 5th, 6th grade?
Ma'am, I'm in 5th grade.
Okay, tell me.
Ma'am, I'm in 6th grade. Ma'am, I think science is like what things are made of. It is like unexplorable. We have to, we have, it's unlimited. Everywhere it is science, and it's everything is made of it, and we have to study it, but then it's naturally there. Even though if we don't study it, it's just naturally there, and that is science.
Okay, so it exists even if we don't study it, huh? Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at science, actually. So I'm going to now, is there anybody else who's dying to tell us what they think science is? Otherwise, I'm going to move on and share with you something.
Ma'am?
Yes?
Science is studying about environments and organisms.
Okay, and which grade are you in?
5th, ma'am.
5th. Okay. All right. So how we see science, okay? So would you agree that we think of science in terms of facts? Yeah. In terms of information, right? That it's neutral. That means it is not, okay, when I say bias and prejudice, I will explain that a little bit. So it's neutral in the sense that it's not for something, it's not against something. It's just telling us as things are in the world. Okay. And this is the natural world I'm talking about, the physical world. Yeah. So it's not like it's not that it's like this, like for instance, I may say, I like this person because they are similar to me. But I don't know anything about the person, and I may say, I don't know, somehow I don't like that person. So that comes from a very deep sort of a kind of a bias, or I have what is called a prejudice. I don't know anything about a particular movie, for instance, and I'll just say, oh, I don't know, I somehow don't like that movie. Why do you not like it? Oh, I don't know, it doesn't look like it's a good movie. I have no evidence of any sort. I haven't seen the movie, I don't know the story, but science is not like that. And that's our perception. That's what we think. That's how we see it, that it's neutral, right? And it's entirely objective. That means it is, again, the same thing. That is in terms of, it is telling you what is in front of it, okay? So through science, we see the world as through our observations. And somebody talked about scientists, observe, right? So we are not sort of coloring it with our opinion, but we are saying, okay, this is what it is. Whether it is good or bad, no. We're just saying this is what it is. And also there is a belief that science is done by extraordinary people, that, scientists are these brilliant geniuses, right? That there's also that sense a lot of people have about science and scientists. That's how we see it. Okay. So does anybody disagree with any of this, or do they have some other point that they want to raise at this point in our conversation? Or if you disagree with it, if you want to, leave a comment in the box, that's great. We can even pick it up later. But this is just a background to our conversation. Okay. All right. Yet another little quiz now. Okay. Take a minute or two. I'm just going to read the names. Some of these may be familiar to you. Some people, every name may be familiar. Okay, so Stephen Hawking. So what I want you to just put in the chat box is, which of these names do you know? Or maybe what's even better is, in the chat box, just write which of these names you don't know. Okay, Stephen Hawking, Charles Darwin, C.V. Raman, Venki Ramakrishnan, Jennifer Doudna, Marie Curie, Rohini Godbole, Gagandeep Kang, Rachel Carson, Anna Mani, Kamala Sohoni. So, which of these people do you know? Or maybe in the box, who you don't know? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9. You know those names, Janani, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And Dakshit, you know, or you don't know. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, what about 10 and 11? 10 and 11, okay, okay. None, all right. Dakshan, none, okay. Anybody who knows any of these names?
Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, I know first, second.
Yeah, you know Stephen Hawking and Charles Darwin, okay.
Yes, ma'am, I know even third, ma'am.
C.V. Raman, okay. And
Yes,
the fourth? Oh, Alexander, you know the fourth. Venki Ramakrishnan, very good, okay.
Ma'am, I know only those 3 names, ma'am. I don't know other scientists' names.
Okay. Anybody else? And it's not just the students, adults, anybody, whoever is on the screen. So Aisha knows Venki Ramakrishnan, Jennifer Doudna, 10 and 11. Oh,
I know almost 10 of them. I know almost 10 of them.
Yeah, who's that?
That's Ainesh from the ninth grade.
Okay, from the ninth grade. Okay, Maya, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Okay.
So Malshi has messaged me privately. She says she knows 1, 2, 3, and 6.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 6. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 6, and 10. It's interesting that many of us don't know many of the names. Okay. So I'm just looking at who knows 10. Rachel, do you know 1, 2, 6, and 10, or you don't know 1, 2, 6, and 10? You know 1, 2, 6, and 10, I'm assuming.
Ma'am, I know all the names, but I've heard of 10.
You've heard of 10. Annamani, you've heard of. Wonderful. Wonderful. Preeti, okay, great. 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, and 10. All right. Does anybody know number 11? Aisha knows now. No, Aisha doesn't know. Okay. Anybody knows number 11?
Yeah, I know.
Suhas has messaged me privately, 4, 7, 8, 9, 11.
Okay. Okay. 11 he knows. Okay. Very good. All right. So it's interesting. So I'm going to ask now the question, why do we know some names and not the others?
Ma'am, because we know of we heard of some names in some particular place, and we might not hear about the other names. And
okay, so you heard it in some particular place,
or
right?
Sometimes we might see one invention and remember them as they invented it or something like that.
Okay, fine. But also there are names in this who may not have invented something, but who have contributed significantly to science.
Ma'am, I was just telling one example, ma'am. I'm just not.
Yeah, I understood. I absolutely understood. Yeah. Okay. Next is, how do we know some names and not others? And you responded just now saying how we know. Anybody else wants to share how do we know some names and not the others?
Ma'am, can I tell?
Yeah, you can tell.
Ma'am, because some of them are Nobel laureates, such as C.V. Raman and Marie Curie.
Okay,
Others
and so is Venki Ramakrishnan.
Oh, yeah. And also, few of them are professors at IISc, Rohini Godbole.
Yeah, Rohini Godbole.
And few people have contributed to fields such as Annamani and Kamala Sohini.
Yeah, Kamala Sohoni. Yeah, Kamala Sohoni was, what was Kamala Sohoni? How do you know her name?
Ma'am, she's a biochemist, I guess.
And Annamani?
Annamani was the Director General of Indian Meteorological Department.
She retired as Deputy Director General, but you know, it's very interesting, Annamani. Not many people know about her work, how it has contributed to how we're developing solar energy and wind energy today in India.
Ma'am, I think she also researched on radiation and ozone layer.
Yeah, she did. She worked on physics. I mean, she's a physicist and she did a lot of work in meteorology. That's right. Yes. Wonderful. Okay. So we know some of these names and we don't know the others because we've seen them, they've appeared in our textbooks, for instance, Marie Curie. And some of the others, like some of you here, know because you've either heard of them, you know, in some context or the other, right? So Gagandeep Kang, for instance, was a huge contributor to what we know in India about COVID, about SARS-CoV-2. And during the pandemic, Gagandeep Kang gave excellent interviews and allowed us to understand how, and she's done a lot of work on vaccinations. And she contributed significantly to getting information about COVID-19 and also about SARS-CoV-2 to the common person, you know, in language that was accessible to all of us. So that was huge. Her contribution has been absolutely huge there. Yeah. Okay. So now moving on. So what is science actually in the real world? Like we talked about what we all think science is and how we perceive science, but how does it actually get practiced in the real world, right? So I'm sure we all understand this, right? That it's a human endeavor, that human beings have come together and they collaborate in order to practice science, right? It's also a process of discovery that some of you talked about. But science is also a way of thinking about the world around us, about how we make decisions, right? And at the same time, science, it not only shapes society, but it's also shaped by our priorities. For instance, today, our priority is a planetary challenge, right? Climate change is in front of all of us, as are wars, as are the threats of nuclear power, particularly nuclear weapons, social tensions, right? So a lot of the work that's done in science and by scientists is also shaped by that. Money is also provided for certain kinds of work, not for all kinds of work. And also remember that, science is practiced by all of us. It's practiced by human beings like you and me, right? They are not extraordinary in the sense of they do extraordinary work. They put an extraordinary amount of effort, scientists do, but they are human, right? So therefore, they have all our failings, they have our biases, they have prejudices. They are deeply inspirational. They are inspired by beauty, by art, by music, just like you and me. They're inspired by discovery, but there's also frustration in being a scientist. So all of this is part of the practice of science. And the reason why I'm sort of laying this elaborate foundation is because what we're going ahead to talk about, where are the women of science, comes from the fact that science is practiced in the real world, that it's practiced by human beings. It's not an order of nature. Nature doesn't have science. Nature just exists. It's human beings who put explanations and meanings to it, yeah? To try and find out what is this truth that exists in nature? What is truly reality? What is true nature, right? How does it function? How is it what it is? So we're trying to answer these kinds of questions. There are other questions that philosophy answers, but through modern science and by asking questions, we try to understand how this world works, this universe. What is the universe? How is it put together? What makes it tick? What makes it work? Yeah. So that's really what science is as it is practiced. Okay. So we put too much of a burden sometimes on scientists, All right. So let's start with history. Okay. So we're going to go back to Charles Darwin. I think most of you are familiar with Charles Darwin. Yeah. So his contribution to human evolution is extraordinary, right? A lot of what we understand today comes from the work that Darwin did. But interestingly, Darwin said something in his time in 1871 and what I've highlighted in yellow, that there seems to me to be a great difficulty from the laws of inheritance, if I understand those laws rightly, in their becoming the intellectual equals of man. So he didn't think that women were women were intellectually equal to men. So that's an interesting perception and thought and belief that he held as a scientist. And then we have Kamala Sohoni, who was the first Indian woman to get a PhD in a scientific discipline. And when she had applied at the Indian Institute of Science, C.V. Raman, who was an extraordinary scientist and who did extraordinary work basically, but he didn't admit her as a regular student because there was a deep bias at that time against women, and so so he held a bias as well. So then the question is, and that's why I sort of was giving you that background that. Science is done by human beings. And so these kinds of biases that were held, because you're a woman, you are not intellectually equal to a man, and which of course prevented a lot of women from, they contributed to science. It's not that they didn't contribute. They did under very extraordinarily difficult circumstances, but their contributions were not recognized. And actually, a lot of women's contributions, their names were lost. And many of us don't even know the names of so many women who have contributed to science. That little exercise we did earlier gave us a sense of it. Yeah. So then today, where are we? And I've just taken two examples. There are zillions of examples from history on how women's contributions to science has been lost in some cases, and other cases we don't know about it. So if anybody's interested to understand this more and to learn more, there's a beautiful podcast called The Lost Women of Science. Please take the time to go to it, and you will hear very detailed stories of the contributions of these women to science, why they were lost to science, and why was it important to bring them back to our consciousness and for us to understand the work that they did. Okay. So in Londa Schibinger's book, she's a professor of history of science professor, and she says in that women were not to be viewed merely as inferior to men, but as fundamentally different and thus incomparable to men. So it was not just and this difference to say that they are different from men. And here we're talking about intellect, okay, specifically talking about intellect. So if we were to come to today, there's a study, which very recent one from December 2023, which says that 1 out of every 6 scientists is in India is a woman. But we have a lot of women studying science in universities. So what happens, right? And a Bias Watch study. Bias Watch is this group that is looking at this issue of gender and science, it's representation in science. And the reason I use the word gender is because it's not just women or men, but it's also other genders, right? Why is there a bias, and why do we not know enough about their contributions? Why are they not present in the field of science? Yeah. So this is where we are today. We are in 2024, from 1871 onwards. Yeah. Okay, so now we've talked about that whole background of what is science, right? So what is science telling us about this difference? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because after all, we're talking about learning about the world around us through the practice of modern science. So let us look at evidence. Yeah. So let us see, what is science telling us? These are perceptions we have, but what is the information we have? What is the data we have? What is the evidence we have? Yeah. So the first question is that, are women and men hardwired to excel in specific things? So is it that men can do certain things and women can do certain things, or women can't do certain things, men can't do certain things, etc.? Is there an inherent sex and or gender difference that defines or limits what humans are capable of doing and pursue in our lives? So because you're of a particular gender, are you incapable of doing something? Or because you're of a particular gender, are you capable of doing something, right? And is it all about nature? Is it something we inherit, and can we not change it through how we live our lives, the choices we make, right? Our environment, how we bring up our children, so can we not change that through it, right? And so I thought, very, very effectively, Calvin and Hobbes, as always, that's my go-to for all things science, actually, because I think it gives us a huge reality check. So like Calvin's father says, well, we men are better at abstract reasoning, and go tell your mother that, okay? So this is a very deeply held belief, right? So let's look at what science is telling us. After all, like good scientists, we want to know what is true and what is not, and what is the evidence we have today. There might be different kind of evidence that emerges as we dig a little deeper into this, or as scientists work a little bit more into this, right? Okay, so what's the evidence? So today we are going to look at 3 lines of evidence from neuroscience, which is the study of the nervous system, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The study of the nervous system as the study of the brain and the associated nervous system. From endocrinology, which is the study of hormones, yeah, to put it very simply, and from evolutionary biology, right? And we're going to look at, human evolution. So we're going to go far back and try and understand what is evolutionary biology telling us. Yeah. And I thought, what is very interesting in this context is to look at what the Nobel laureate Santiago Ramon y Cajal said in 1906, that hypotheses come and go, but data remains. Yeah. So that means we all, we have this theory that women can't read maps, or men are better at mathematics, or girls can't do mathematics, or girls are not good at physics. and we have all kinds of theories, but let's look at what the data says, right? The data tells you the truth. That gives you the evidence. Yeah. And I'm going to leave this question with you to think about, and you can put your answer into the chat box. What is the difference between biological sex and gender? Are they the same thing or are they different things? Okay. So think about it and put it in the chat box, and we can come back to it later. Okay, so we're going to go through each of these pieces of evidence one by one. All right. And after each of these, I'm just going to pause in case you have any question that is, that's sort of something that we should address. Okay. All right. So let's start with neuroscience. Yeah. Okay. So what is the evidence from neuroscience, right? So we're going, we're going historically. Okay. So we're looking at the skull, the external, which houses the brain. Then we will go look at the inside of the brain, and then we'll try and understand a little bit more. So what do we know from the skull, right? So remember one thing, when people were looking for evidence at that point of time, they were hunting to find evidence to show that male and female brains are different. Okay? They were not looking at what is the brain telling me? No. We believe that male and female brains are different. So let us find the difference. Let us find evidence that proves this hypothesis that we have. Okay. So they looked at skull shape, size, and brain weight. Yeah. So now an evolutionary biologist, right, John Romanes, he looked at the average brain weight of women. And we had this question right in the beginning, is about 5 ounces less than that of men. So he said, just purely on the basis of anatomy, women have inferior intellectual power compared to men. Okay, clear. He was very clear about that. But at the same time, in 1888, there was this teacher, and her work was never really recognized, Helen Gardner. She said that if you look at the ratio of the body weight to brain weight, or body size to brain size, actually there isn't that much difference. So it's interesting that you're looking at absolute weight, okay? But she was like, why would you look at that? You have to look at it in proportion. So it's very interesting how different, how she thought about this, right? And so she was actually one of the earliest people, and she wrote a letter to Darwin, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about this. So here is a way of thinking scientifically, right? That you don't look at absolute numbers like that. Okay, so that's something for us to think about, right? How do we look at data, right? Relatively, where do you look at data relatively, and where do you look at it absolutely? What does absolute data actually tell you in this context? Are you putting it in the context of information that you've got? Yeah, how do you look at, you can be a very good observer, you may record data, but how are you looking at data? How are you interpreting it? Then we go inside the brain. Okay, now a lot of work has been done, and there are two pieces of research that I have quoted from here. And Daphna Joel, who's a professor of psychology and neuroscience, has done some absolutely brilliant work in this area, together with a whole bunch of other neuroscientists and psychologists as well. And the reason we're taking neuroscience is because, remember, we're talking about intellectual capacity, which is in the brain, right? Okay. So this is some of the evidence we have, okay? So male brain, the size of the brain is big, female size of the brain is small, okay? And then if you look at the figure, you can see where the cerebral cortex is, that males have a thinner cortex, females have a thicker cortex. White matter, gray matter, different. And you've also probably heard commonly said, right? Oh, gray matter, deficient in gray matter, which means you're less intelligent, or they have a lot of gray matter. That means they're more intelligent. So are females more intelligent than males? Question. Then there is the amygdala. Okay, so the amygdala is this part of the brain which actually plays a very important function in regulating emotions, decision-making, aggression, assertion. So males have bigger amygdala than females. Okay, so is there a difference in the way decisions are made? Maybe. And then we have the hippocampus, and these are parts of an older parts of the brain which have come down to us, what is called the limbic brain, okay, evolutionarily, among the oldest parts of the brain. So the male brain has a smaller hippocampus than the female brain. Now, interestingly, hippocampus, one of the roles of hippocampus, it plays a very important role in spatial reasoning. So reading maps. So do women read maps better than men? But that's not the common belief. Okay. So when you have all of this information, how are you going to look at this information? What is the difference between a male and a female brain here? Is there something called a male and a female brain? Right? Okay. So, okay, I'm going to pause here because there's a very interesting comment here from Maya. Person's gender is slightly dependent upon their mindset. Okay. Okay. So Maya, you're giving us the definition, the difference between gender and sex, right? Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. All right. We'll come back to it. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Another comment on the same topic, just above Maya's.
Just above Maya. Okay. Sri Vikartri. Okay. Biological sex refers to different biological or physiological characteristics of males and females, whereas gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of men and women. All right. And we'll wait for some more before we sort of say anything about it. Maybe we can pick it up when we, okay, so let's come back to I was just very interested to see the comments there. Okay. So then there is also other information that has come from research, which says that, the connection across brain regions. So there's a difference in how brain regions are connected in female brains and male brains, for us to just basically understand this. So how does that impact? How is that different? So does that make a female brain? How does it make a female brain different from a male brain? Okay, so this is all the information we have, which is telling us a different story, actually. It's raising more questions in our head, I presume, right? So what has emerged from all of this information that we have? So what is emerging, interestingly, through all of this in this research in neuroscience and psychology is that the questions that are being asked are very different. So is this a binary? Can we just say male, female? Can we say that? A feminine, masculine? Or is there a spectrum? Is there a range of characteristics? So can we say this is a female brain and a male brain? Males think like this, females think like this. You have those books, women are from, men are from Mars and women are from Venus kind of thing. Can you even do that? Is it possible to do this kind of a binary black-white sort of a thing? That's a question that emerges, right? And about 122 characteristics, right, measures were analyzed through studies, which, and looking at the differences that differentiate technically men from women. What has emerged, therefore, what scientists are now calling is what is called a mosaic brain hypothesis. So every human brain actually is a combination of many of these characteristics or these features. So each of us, and I must say that, a lot of what I'm sharing in this conversation is actually inspired by the work that a physicist turned science journalist, Angela Saini, has put together in her wonderful book called Inferiors. And I would recommend that you read that, because she's done a brilliant compilation. And one of the books in that was by Gina Rippon, The Gendered Brain. And this is another book I would strongly recommend if people who are interested in it. And it's a very easy read, as is Inferiors. Inferiors has a lot of information, but Angela writes beautifully. So please do see if you can get these books and read them. So therefore, what has emerged in this mosaic brain hypothesis is that each of us is like a mosaic. And you can see that image on the side, where you put a lot of pieces together. It's a piece of art, actually. Yeah. So it's like a mosaic, right?
Yes, ma'am. Mosaic is a type of art.
Exactly. Right. So this is what has, so this is what we know today. This is how we see the brain today. So not black and white, not male, female brain, but we're actually a mishmash. We're a mosaic. Yeah. So then the question is, how did scientists know this? How do they get into the brain, right? See, so far, when we're talking about the skull, which is external, we're talking about the brain, which even a dead, you can take the brain out of out of a cadaver and you can study the brain. But how do you study a living brain, right? Now, a live person like yours and my brain, how is it functioning? What's happening? What happens when we sleep? What are the signals the brain is sending? How do we study that? Now, this is where we also have to remember that we talked about science, right? But a significant part of the work we do in science goes into building technology. And the developments in technology then come back to help us understand science better. So it's quite beautiful, the science-technology relationship. And very interestingly, and we talked about this earlier when we were talking about Anna Money and we were talking about science being a human endeavor, that societal priorities, right? So like now we want to understand what is this male-female brain, what is the brain really? What is gender, right? We want to understand that. We are using developments in technology that allows brain imaging, electroencephalograms, right? We use all of that to study a living brain, right? So, yeah.
Ma'am, you told about hypothesis, right?
Yes.
Ma'am, what's the meaning of it?
Okay, so to say it very simply, you might have a question, right? You might have observed something, and you will say, I think this is because of this. But you only think it is because of something.
Not sure.
You're not sure, but how will you be sure? How will you be sure that it is the explanation?
You have to try it.
You have to
try it or analyze it or something.
Yes, but you have to also sometimes devise experiments, no?
Yes, ma'am.
To find answers to your question, right? Right? So a hypothesis is that question, and then you design experiments or you go out and make observations over time to find evidence, to get the data. Data is your evidence, right? Your observations are your evidence. But then you come back and you look at your hypothesis and say, okay, this is what I have found. This was my question. And then you go back and see if other people have worked on it, have other scientists worked on it, right? What have they found? And then you slowly put the pieces together and then you find an answer to your question. Does that make sense? What a hypothesis is?
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
So mean like everybody think of something else and then they join together to make one good kind of theory and evidence.
Yes. So theory is a theory can be a hypothesis first. It can start with a hypothesis. Once you find the evidence, it may give you an explanation to a real phenomenon. But remember one thing about science.
Yes,
today you may have an explanation. Tomorrow,
you might have
be another person. For instance, you may be doing some brilliant work. You might find some new information and say, hey, that theory which you had to explain this phenomenon, sorry, I've got fresh evidence. So this is the beauty of science. It keeps growing. We keep learning more and more about the universe. Like, for instance, we studied about the skull outside, right? We looked at the brain from a cadaver. But because we have new technology now, we're learning more and more, right? And we're beginning to understand that the brain is actually a mosaic.
Yes,
right? Very exciting, no? About
many small pieces joining a big
exactly. Yes,
art.
yes. Wonderful. Yes.
So
absolutely.
like many small pieces of evidence and everything to join a big thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. So then we have something called neuroplasticity, meaning that the brain is like Play-Doh, right? It's flexible, meaning we can shape it the way we want to some extent. I'm using a very simple analogy of plasticity, but that it is not static, meaning it doesn't stop growing and developing. It's possible through the way we live, through the choices we make in life, through how we train the brain, through how we grow, through the kind of questions we ask, through what we read, through how we live our life, to bring about changes in the brain at any point in your life. Okay? So lifelong experience molds our brain, right? So now, when people tell you that, oh, you can't do physics, you can't do chemistry, or you can't do science, then you have to ask yourself the question, right? You have to ask yourself the question that, is it true? Can I not do science? Why? Why can't I do science? Let me see, what is it about science that, how do I make choices in my life, right? Not because somebody tells me I can or I can't do it. I'm a girl, so I can't do this. I'm a boy, so I can do this. No. Let me try and figure out another way of thinking about this, right? So what did researchers say?
It's your wish, what you want to do. That's
correct. Absolutely. You have the ability to make that choice. So every single brain must be unique, right? And also, when we look at differences in sex, right? When we say male and female, you can't just interpret the information as you see it. You have to understand, okay, where is this person coming from, right? What is the background they're coming from? What is their life experience? Why are they this way? Why do they think this way? Why is their brain this way? Why is the picture of their brain like this? What has happened? What is their health condition? It's not just that it's a male or a female, right? Okay, so therefore we must put all this info, like you said, it's about, different pieces of information need to be put together to understand how the human brain actually operates and what is the human brain. All right. So before we go to hormones, does anybody have a burning question from what we've discussed so far? If you do, you can either drop it in the chat box, or you can, if you think it's something you want to ask now, you can ask. Otherwise, we can move to the next piece of evidence, which is hormones. So I'll give you a minute. I'm giving you a minute only because we are always running out of time. Yeah. Yeah.
Ma'am, for now, we were we are learning about the evidences, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, ma'am, why are we learning these evidences, ma'am? How is it useful to us in our lives?
Very good question. So we will come to that. Can you hold on till then?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
hold on? Yeah, okay, fine. So I'm going to go a little bit faster because I'm sort of taking a look at the time, and we have about 6 minutes to 5, and so we have only about 35 minutes left. Okay.
Yes,
All right. So when we come to hormones, right? There's this whole there are lots of ideas about, for instance, when you look at teenagers or adolescents, they will say, oh, but it's their hormones talking, it's because of their hormones that they're behaving this way. So is that true? Is it that it's the hormones, or is it the way the surrounding environment that nurtures the individual? Okay, so how much is your behavior, or you being a woman or a man, dictated by the hormones, and how much is it, what is the contribution of your environment, right? So that is something that scientists have been looking at. Now, earlier, there was this, before the discovery of sex hormones, there were various beliefs about, about sexual differences. But what science is telling us is actually that we know from evidence that women's bodies are better equipped to survive than men. And what happens at birth is very, very interesting. So for the first 7 weeks after the embryo is fertilized by the sperm, the default is a female. Okay, till 7 weeks, the genitalia is female. Okay, it's only after 7 weeks that testosterone is produced, and there is a physical transformation into a male fetus. So till 7 weeks, all fetuses are female. It's only after that the testosterone is produced, and testosterone is the male hormone, what we call the male hormone. Estrogen is called the female hormone, but actually both sexes produce testosterone, estrogen, and other hormones, but their functions are different in each of the sexes. Okay, that's we'll leave it there for the time being, and because
Ma'am, what are hormones?
So hormones are, to sort of explain it very simply, they are sort of chemical messengers in a sense. Okay, they regulate. They are biochemicals which regulate the way we grow, the way. So, for instance, when we're talking about sex hormones, right? So, for instance, when you become a teenager, right, there are changes in the male body that happen, right? So you may grow a mustache, you may grow a beard, and then there are also other changes in your genitalia that happen, right? And that is,
they describe
those changes. Yeah, those changes are caused by hormones. Women, for example, girls will develop breasts. They will start menstruating. Those changes are brought about by hormones, by sex hormones. Okay.
Oh, it's the changes from birth to the teenager or adult age. It is all because of the hormones.
One of the things that, and even growth is regulated by other hormones. Here we're talking about.
Yeah, some people grow slowly, some people grow very fast.
Yes, and those are regulated by other hormones, which are called growth hormones. Okay.
or sometimes even in weight also, hormones.
Yes, they do play a big role. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so then the question is that if testosterone and estrogen, if it's produced by both males and females, then again, and if our social activities, if the way we are in society, if that also affects hormonal levels, then is it possible to say, male and female? Is it possible to say that? Is it possible to say masculine and feminine? Or again, is that a continuum? Doesn't it depend on your behavior, on the social context, on the way you engage, with society, right? So these are questions that have come up, right? So for instance, when women go into menopause, which happens after a certain age, when estrogen levels fall, okay, and they're not able to reproduce anymore, their immunity comes down, right? So these are changes that happen. So now then what happens, right? So is this masculine, feminine thing, is it set in stone? Or should we begin to think about sex and gender in a more, as a sort of a continuum, as a sort of spectrum? So this is a question that comes up. Then let's look at evolutionary biology, right? So and there's just a lot more evidence, but I've just picked a few for us to get a sense of what science is telling us. So what is evolutionary biology telling us, right? Evolutionary biology is saying that, look, there was this, there was always this belief that, men are, it's that is the male is the one who goes out and makes choice, right? And so like male birds, male animals, they preen, they look different because they're looking for the right partner, whereas females are sexually passive, right? They're like in birds, particularly, you see this very dramatic looking males and the females look very dowdy. And then there was this whole theory that it's because males are, they are the ones who have choice. And going further down, when we look at apes, when we look at primates as well, since from an evolutionary point of view, that is our evolutionary lineage. So from that information also, there was this belief that males are promiscuous, they're undiscriminating, and females are sexually passive. That was the belief, okay? But then we had evidence from anthropology, from indigenous communities in North Africa, the Himbas, where women had multiple partners, where there were two or more fathers who took care of children. Okay, so you had a group of children who were taken care of by a group of men who were fathers, right? So the question is that there is nothing set in stone. It doesn't say that, women have to have only one partner. So therefore, this male, female, this belief that males have to be like this, females have to be like this, a lot of this, we are getting newer evidence that is telling us a very different story, actually. Okay. And then let's look at, evidence from primates that we were just talking about, chimpanzees and bonobos. The first study was done with chimpanzees. Many of you are familiar with Jane Goodall and the work that she did with chimps, right? So in the picture, it's the chimps is the photograph above and the bonobos below. So chimpanzees, there's a very clear social hierarchy there, okay? The male is the aggressor, the protector of the community, all of that. And so chimpanzees were the model for human beings because they're our closest relative. So, therefore patriarchy, where the male is the assertive, masculine is assertive, that was the model that was brought down for human society as well. But then when other primatologists began to look at other models, like bonobos, in bonobos, females dominate. So then the debate now opens up into, in human society, is male domination inevitable? No, because we also have one of our closest genetic relatives is the bonobo. So why is human society structured like this? Was male domination always the biological norm, is the question? Or is it again, or do we have choice? Or do we need to think of our society differently, right? So it raises a lot of very interesting questions as evidence builds. So then, now we come to looking at all of the stuff that we put together. So neuroscience, whether it is the brain, whether it is hormones, whether it is evolutionary biology, whether it is stories from indigenous communities in Africa, okay, it is telling us that we have to begin to ask this question about sex and gender, right? It's also important to see what are the questions that are being asked. Who is asking the question? Is it only male scientists who are asking the questions? What questions are female scientists asking? What questions are scientists of other genders asking? Right? And increasingly, as more and more women have started coming into science, it is changing the way how science is done, right? Because we're asking very different questions. We're also challenging assumptions. As a result of all of this, new ideas, new understanding is emerging, which is also very exciting, you know. But we live in a society, we live in human society, hierarchy is a big thing, right? Power structures. Who has the power, right? So therefore, these questions become difficult and they start becoming challenging. But if you're truly looking at science and if you're real scientists, we should be looking at the evidence that is in front of us, isn't it? Yeah. So like, for instance, very recently, there was a absolutely fascinating piece of work that was done. You know, there is among ornithologists and in literature, it's that it was believed that only male birds sing. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, that male birds sing because they're calling female birds, etc. But the questions that were being asked was, why do male birds sing? Where do male birds sing? Why is it that male birds sing, right? And that was the question. So how did it evolve in male birds, etc.? But when female scientists, you know, when you had more female scientists in ornithology, the question that was being asked is, why don't we see this trait in certain females? Or how and why did a certain behavior evolve in females? And you know, tropical birds, female birds sing very much. But also because a lot of the research was done in North America or in the Northern Hemisphere, I mean, you know, in parts of the world which were temperate. And because of weather, because of conservation of energy for nesting and for laying eggs and for taking care of the young, the female bird was conserving energy, as was found in one study. Okay, so there are very different reasons for why, female birds were not singing in certain parts of the world. Okay, so when the questions become different, evidence becomes different kind of evidence emerges. So we know now that the human brain is a mosaic, right? And that the way we are brought up, our environment, our social context, all that impacts how this brain functions and how it actually behaves, right? And so therefore, we now have a lot of questions and more and more work is underway. And so we'll probably get newer evidence, right? So now I want to come back to the question one of you asked, why does this matter? Why should I know this? Why is it important, right?
Yes, ma'am. I asked.
Okay, so why do you think it's important? And I want to hear multiple voices, okay? Why do you think it's important for us to know all this? I mean, why am I sitting here? Why are you sitting here? Why are we having this conversation? Anybody can unmute and sort of just take a shot. There is no right or wrong answer, like I said.
To learn something new.
To learn something new. Okay. Okay. So you're curious and you want to learn something new. That's a valid enough question. I think that's a valid enough reason. Somebody else, come on.
Because I want to know why, they don't have more opportunities when compared to men.
Why women don't have more opportunities when compared to men? Okay. You want to know that. So it's a social question. Okay. Girls, come on. Maya, Mariam, I can see your names in front of me. Why do you think this matters? Why do we need to know all this? Why are we sitting through this conversation? Why are scientists asking these questions?
What is this evidence for?
What is this evidence for? Are you asking the question or are you saying that it matters because you want to look at what is this evidence for?
I'm asking a question. Why is this evidence for?
What is this evidence for? And you're going to answer that question, no?
No.
So you're going to think about the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Because before I sort of say anything, I want at least, have any of the girls said anything yet?
Ma'am,
No, I want to hear from the girls.
No,
Come on.
Okay, come.
All yours, girls. The stage is all yours.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
we are asking, why does it matter to know these things? Aisha's given a response.
Very nice, Aisha. Okay. These stereotypes and binaries affect us in all spheres of life, personal and social. It affects how and what kind of knowledge we build, what kind of world we build. Aisha, thank you so much. That was so well said. I think it's much, I mean, Aisha, you've said it much better than what I'm going to say. Wonderful. What does everybody think about what Aisha said? You know, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think the expression, what she's saying.
Ma'am, what's stereotypes and binary?
Stereotypes. Stereotype meaning that there is a standard way of looking at it. You know, like I'll give you an example and I hope it helps. All boys are like this. All girls are like this.
Oh.
All male birds sing, all female birds don't. So that kind of a belief, right? Yeah.
It's just like it is standard and it is like this and it can't change.
Yeah. And without any evidence, okay? Meaning you just believe this. Yeah. And binary means plus, minus, black, white, no gray. Male, female, masculine, feminine, nothing in between.
Opposites, like.
Sort of. No, I won't say opposites at all, actually, because male and female are not opposite, no?
No, I'm just telling like.
They're just two different dimensions, I would say. Two different. Yeah. Okay, so Preeti also, yes, Preeti is completely agrees with Aisha. Okay, if anybody else wants to put anything down there, yes, Janani.
I think that this topic matters not mainly because of science, but because of our lives and our rights.
Yes,
that was
absolutely. Okay, so what am I saying, right? Much less elegantly than all of you. But I think it's important for us to think about this in the sense that, so like I said, this is science, not the end of the story, right? We have theories and they're waiting for evidence. So then the question really is, why are we focusing only on similarities or differences, right?
Ma'am, I also want to tell that it's not like a female or male, ma'am. Anybody can work on science and it is their wish if they want to work, and everybody can use science as it is.
Very true. Thank you. So now the question is, why when research was being done, why were we looking at similarities or differences? So supposing instead we looked at a different way of thinking, right? What is the relationship between sex, brain, and gender? What if we were to think of this in terms of relationship instead of thinking in terms of similarities or differences? No? Because when we say similar or different, immediately it goes into a binary, right? Because we are saying either you are with me or you're against me, okay? So, but we're not saying what is the relationship between sex, brain, and gender? Is there a relationship? We're asking a different question, right? And like Aisha said so beautifully, society can end up producing a biological change, nature, nurture, and plasticity. So we can do that. It is in our hands. It's a human construct, remember. Gender is a societal construct, right? Biological sex is the sex organ that you have, but the gender is a social construct. So then what does this mean? Not just, for us as women and women in STEM and et cetera, but like Aisha pointed out about us as human beings, right? So today we talked about the bias against women, right? Against gender. But there are also biases of various other identities, of race, of color, of caste, particularly in India, right? Somebody of a particular caste doesn't get the same opportunity as somebody else. Ethnicity, they come from, what tribe do they come from, right? But they don't. So there is discrimination at all of these levels, and not based on science. It's based on some sort of a fear sometimes. It's based on claims. It's based on something somebody has said without any evidence, right? So maybe this work in gender, the relationship between sex, brain, and gender can also help us look at the relationship between caste, brain, between race and brain, and look at us as human beings, right? and to collaborate and to work together to make the world a better place to live in, right? And to protect the planet. I mean, there are such much larger issues for us to think about, isn't it? No? So I think that's sort of something that we need to sort of take away from this. Yeah. So did that answer your question? One of you who were talking about why does it matter? Why should we know this, etc.?
Yes, ma'am.
Did it answer your question? Not answer, at least makes you think about it. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, not bad in terms of time. We have 15 minutes. Okay. So these are images of books, that are available online. Whoever is interested, you can actually go and access. You can look these books up. And I just want to leave you with some questions, etc. But we'll now throw it open to any questions, comments from everybody. I'm going to stop sharing in a minute. So some of the questions I want to leave you with is, what are some of the questions you think about other kinds of biases and prejudices? Because, science is supposed to be objective. It is supposed to be free of prejudices, but we operate, like I said earlier, in society. Science is embedded in society. It's practiced by human beings. But is it possible for us to use our understanding of the nature of science? What is science? We need to look at evidence before we believe in something, right? We need to try and find that evidence. And what kind of evidence would you look for? Some of the questions you might have. How would you go about designing these experiments? And what are some of our own biases and prejudices that we have come across? Not somebody else's, but our own. And we build them very early in life. So is it possible for us to face them, think about what evidence do we have to say this about something? A black cat crosses my path, it's evil, it's bad, it's a bad thing. Why do I say that? Where have I learned it from? How do I know this? Is there evidence for it, right? So these are some of the questions I want to leave you with. But I'm going to stop sharing. And we'll throw it open for
comment/question in the chat.
Yes.
Someone who's very sure they don't want to tell us their name.
I won't be telling. Yeah, sure. Don't want to know. Okay. There are various questions which come up. If nature has differentiated in the making of different genders, so why do women insist on behaving equal to men? Is it mentioned? It says equal to men and so on. I suppose it's not about how the nature has created us all. If it all affects a person's dignity and independence, one should take action for all. And I was very much into these sorts of questions, basically curious, so decided to explore. All right. And who knows? Who knows? We might get more evidence on this in the future. That's true.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, can we create more things pollution-free objects that make electricity and something like that? So, ma'am,
you should look for. Yes.
Ma'am, I just have an idea, ma'am. I don't know if it is true or not.
Hi, Jagat. So I'd love to hear your ideas. So I'll send you my email after this class is done, and you can let me know all your ideas. So for now, if you have any questions based on what Radha has shared with us for this session, you should let her know.
Yeah. Thanks, Jagat. Yeah.
Ainesh has his hands up.
Okay, Ainesh. Yes, please go ahead.
Ma'am, so should the question only be related to what you have told, or can it be different, but related to
related to biases? Yeah, related to women, related to biases and prejudices. Yes, sure.
Okay.
It can be, yes, absolutely related to women, biases and prejudices. That would be useful because it could then take the conversation further. You had something else, Ainesh? It was not related to this?
No, ma'am, I just had a doubt and I just clarified it.
Okay. Okay, maybe I should ask a question as to what, maybe each of you can think about it, just pop it into the box. What is the one thing that surprised you today? that you were like, oh my God, I didn't know this. And why did I not know this? One thing that really surprised you. And if somebody wants to unmute and tell us, sure. Otherwise, drop it in the box. The amount of bias just 70 years ago in India, that's a good one. Oh, boys have a bigger brain than girls. Oh, okay. That the male brain is bigger than the female brain. Was that new, Dakshit? Okay. Anybody else? Bias in science? Yeah. Suhas? Yes.
Ma'am, and also to, the lens people have gone to prove that, women are inferior than men, like researching on brain size, researching on birds and, other things.
Right. Interesting.
That the brain can be compared to a mosaic and art forms and everything.
Oh, lovely. Okay. That's new. Okay. Or that surprised you. Bias between women and men in the field of science. Arush, that's an interesting one. Yes, true. Because of our perception of science, I guess. No, Arush? Because we think science is free of bias. Is that why? So while people are thinking about it, another question would be, what is one question you have after today's conversation? The one question that you have and you want to really explore it.
Ma'am, how to make women more active in the field of science, and not only in science, in any other field, and prove that, they're more capable than men, or at least equal to men.
Okay, but that's not a question, no?
My question is, how do we make it?
Okay, how do you make it? Okay, so something you want to think about. Dakshit has no questions. Anybody else who has any questions? One question that you took away from it. We're not looking at answering it now. But one question that you're going to take away and say, okay, I want to know a little bit more about this. It could be some of the facts that I've shared with you. It could be some of the research that I've shared with you.
Ma'am, how can I find more evidence on this?
How can you find more information or evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but by reading at the moment, by reading.
I'm like, ma'am, you mean like you told the evidence about the, not evidence, ma'am, you told information about the brain can be a mosaic, and then other things you can, I want to just like make more things and try and
understand it better.
Understand how it functions and everything.
Okay.
How,
so there are books available, and maybe once you study, once you sort of reach a certain point where you understand the functioning of the brain, some of these books may be more accessible to you. No, I think so. Yeah. Helen Gardner's statement, or probably a sentence from her letter to Darwin. Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's very and so analytical at that point, right? Yeah. And she was a teacher.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I may.
Please. Yes.
I've been thinking through some of these things in my lived experience, right? As a woman trying to do things in a space where what you said of 1 out of 6 scientists are women, right? So when I sort of started working, I went into places where there are more men than women around me, right? And I will be the only woman in that meeting. Everyone else will be men.
Yes.
And I felt like I thought differently. I don't know if that is because I am different or if because I am a woman and they are men. Wide variety.
No, but you're right. Generally, because like you, I mean, I've worked largely in male-dominated sort of environments, and it's very interesting because sometimes what we do as women is we want to conform, and so we begin to function like what we think one should ask questions and function and be like the others in that you want to be part of that tribe which is in that room. And sometimes, yeah, you're right, because you also begin to think later that question that I asked, is it because, but then if we think about the mosaic structure, then we think about our nurturing, how we were brought up, our education, what we've read, what we've experienced in life, and all of that has influenced. So you're coming with so when people say that a room should have diversity, then is it only diversity of gender, but is it also that there should be diversity of brain, actually, in a sense. People with, therefore, maybe diversity of contexts that people come from. That makes a lot more sense than thinking in terms of, yeah.
Absolutely.
So Aisha,
I guess
how social factors affect biology? For example, levels of hormones that you mentioned. Yeah, and Aisha, I have to share this one beautiful example of, there was a study that was done of oxytocin, which is produced when women breastfeed children, their children during lactation. And there was a man who was, who was taking care of his children, and he was holding his baby very close, and they were monitoring oxytocin levels for different conditions. And his oxytocin levels shot up during that point when he was nurturing the baby, just holding the baby. So it was very, very interesting to see how even small, even experiences like that actually cause change in hormones. So then what are we talking about? Why are we? Yeah. Preeti, yes, I teach high school math, and surprisingly, I see majority of the girls opting for creative arts or humanities in spite of being brilliant in sciences. That is a very common, and I don't know where, if it comes from home or where it comes from. Yeah. Are there any particular evidences on the same in different fields of study like anthropology, and as we discussed neuroscience, and I'll look up to rejected ideas or more? Yeah, actually, there is a lot of work in neuroscience and anthropology. And I would recommend, I won't be telling, I will recommend to you that you really look at inferior, because I've sort of just selected a few, just for us to understand the importance of this question. But please do read inferior. There's a lot of documentation of research where the questions were not, where the hypotheses were rejected based on evidence, right? And one of them being this stereotype of male and female, as recent as 2008, when a psychologist persisted in looking for evidence to show the difference. Yeah, so there is definitely, you should really look at that book. I think you will. You'll find it very useful, yeah. So yeah, Preeti, that's also another thing, is how do we as teachers and educators and as parents, how do we engage on this topic, not just this topic, but on the idea of bias and prejudice? And how do we bring scientific thinking into our day-to-day life? Like how do we actually just live our lives thinking scientifically? Yeah. It's not just about doing science, but I think also how we make decisions. I think that's what science also sort of teaches us. That we read claims in newspapers, and now the internet is, it's a feat of information. So how do we,
Radha, I remember you had shared with me a place where I could learn more about exciting women of science in India.
Yes. Bias Watch. No, yeah, actually the people who wrote Lab Hopping. Yeah, that book. Yeah. So I think maybe we should. It's called. No, it's not Bias Watch India, but it's. Let me just pull out the website. Yeah, and the book that we're talking about here is Lab Hopping. It's written by Ashima Dongra and
I've just
Raj.
put the title in the chat.
Oh, great. And the group is called Life of Science. They are the ones who lab hopping, yeah, and you can actually go to their website. It's called Life of. Just look at Life of Science. It's in India, yeah, absolutely, Life of Science. So just look at the information there, and I think that also will give you a sense of what's the story in India.
We often leave our webinars or meetings like this, which talk about deep, sort of big topics, wondering what do I do next, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think one of the things to do next is first to educate ourselves. Okay, I mean, very important to educate ourselves. Rachel, yeah, one thing that I keep thinking about is that not everything that I have seen is accurate to the discoveries done by scientists. By everything that I have seen, I mean most of the male students in my school. Rachel, thank you for that. That's very interesting. But to come back to the question that Janani, that when we leave webinar, and this actually, the way I see all of these conversations are that it's only the beginning, right? We've just touched some things, and then now you have to go deeper into various threads, right? And the one way to do that is to, of course, read. The other way is also to see for ourselves and ask ourselves some of these questions. Start simply, what are the biases I hold? What are the prejudices I hold? And every time I read a claim or every decision I make in life, do I make it based on, like, even who I want to vote for instance? How do I make that decision? And many of you may not be in the voting age here, but I'm just saying, simple, because the elections are on, that's why. So how do I vote for a particular candidate? Is it because my mom said I should, or my neighbor said, or my family said, or because I just think he looks good or she looks good, or everybody's saying that they are good? No, maybe you want to educate yourself about that candidate. And even if, it's not the most popular candidate, it doesn't matter. But you have made a decision based on information and not on a claim. So that's a scientific way of, and for one of you was asking, right? So what's the use of all this information? The use of science is to make our day-to-day decisions logical and without bias and prejudice. And we hope that all the ones who are in school, will think about this, and hopefully, as you get older and you reach my stage in life, you will not have all the biases I hold. Yeah.
Wonderful. Does anyone have anything further they want to discuss with Radha or ask her? Also, after this session is done, feel free to reach out to us at any point of time and share anything that you're thinking through and working through. Also, I'm going to take a minute to show you some of the upcoming masterclasses so that you could register for them if you'd like. They're all free, so you can have lovely conversation with us again. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, can see.
Wonderful. So this is Radha's masterclass up and center. I'm leading one on acrobatic paper frogs, where we try and look at what we can do with origami and making paper frogs do acrobatics, and how physics comes into the picture, and art and design, a lot of those things. And then we have a wonderful thing on the secrets of the stars, which goes into astrophysics and a few beautiful questions together. Right. Also, if you want to see any of our past events, they're all here. You can take a look. I'll share a link in the chat, and feel free to register for any of these masterclasses or all of them.
For both of them.
Yeah, wonderful. Looking forward to meeting.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I may. So thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. I've really been interested in women in science and the kind of problems they share. So this was very enlightening. I was just wondering if so this came to me through another group that I have, which shares bioscience problems, and these a discussion group on WhatsApp. I was wondering if you guys had a social media web page or something like that other than the website. If you could share that as well, that would be great, I think.
We are just starting to be active on LinkedIn and social media.
All right.
And Instagram.
Yeah.
Just search for Gifted World and find us there.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mom. It was a
Thank you.
really great webinar.
Thank you. And thanks, Aisha, for that.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you. Thank you all for the lovely questions and the, just your comments and thoughts. Just wonderful to have to engage in a conversation. It was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you.